Have you ever thought about why some people get away with audacious acts that would destroy others? Why does the same action, performed with hesitation, lead to failure, but performed with boldness, leads to triumph? This video will change how you see courage, confidence, and the invisible force field that boldness creates around those who master it. Today we're diving into Law 28 from the 48 Laws of Power: Enter action with boldness. But this isn't just about being brave or taking risks. This is about understanding one of the most counterintuitive principles of human psychology, that boldness itself, regardless of the underlying reality, creates its own reality. That confidence, even unearned confidence, shapes how others perceive and respond to you in ways that make the confidence self-fulfilling. Let me tell you a story that will reveal everything. In the summer of 1914, a man named Victor Lustig arrived in Paris with empty pockets and expensive tastes. He had no money, no connections, no legitimate prospects. What he had was audacity that bordered on insanity. He read in the newspaper that the Eiffel Tower, that iconic symbol of France, was in need of expensive repairs. The city was debating whether renovation was worth the cost or if the tower should simply be dismantled and sold for scrap metal. Most people would have read that article and moved on. Victor Lustig saw an opportunity. He forged government documents identifying himself as the Deputy Director General of the Ministry of Posts and Telegraphs. He contacted 5 of the largest scrap metal dealers in Paris and invited them to a confidential meeting at a luxury hotel. He arrived in a chauffeur-driven car, wearing an impeccable suit, carrying an expensive briefcase. At the meeting, he explained that the government had decided to dismantle the Eiffel Tower but wanted to keep the decision quiet to avoid public outcry. He was offering these select dealers the exclusive opportunity to bid on the tower's scrap metal, 7,000 tons of iron worth a fortune. The dealers were skeptical at first, but Lustig's absolute confidence, his intimate knowledge of bureaucratic procedures, his willingness to answer every question without hesitation, it all convinced them. One dealer, André Poisson, desperately wanted the contract. Lustig sensed his eagerness and made a bold move that cemented the con. He took Poisson aside privately and hinted that as a government official, he was underpaid and wouldn't mind a personal gift in exchange for ensuring Poisson won the bid. This request for a bribe paradoxically made everything seem more legitimate. A real government official would ask for a bribe. A con artist wouldn't dare. Poisson paid Lustig a substantial sum for the Eiffel Tower scrap metal rights, plus a generous bribe. Lustig immediately left Paris with the money. When Poisson tried to claim his purchase, he discovered the entire thing was a fraud. But here's the remarkable part: Poisson was so embarrassed at being fooled that he never reported it to the police. And Lustig? He was so emboldened by his success that he returned to Paris a month later and sold the Eiffel Tower again to a different scrap dealer. This story isn't just about a clever con. It's about a fundamental principle of human psychology. Lustig succeeded not because his plan was foolproof. It was full of holes. He succeeded because his boldness created a reality distortion field around him. His absolute confidence made people override their skepticism. His willingness to act as if he had every right to sell the Eiffel Tower made others believe he did. His boldness manufactured its own legitimacy. Now let me take you back 2 million years to understand why this works. Our ancestors lived in hierarchical groups where status determined access to resources, mates, and survival itself. But status wasn't primarily determined by actual ability. It was determined by perceived ability. The individual who acted like they deserved high status, who moved with confidence, who showed no hesitation or self-doubt, that individual was treated as high status by others. This created an evolutionary arms race. Those who could project confidence, even confidence that exceeded their actual abilities, received better treatment and opportunities. This advantage was so powerful that natural selection favored individuals with a slight disconnect between their actual competence and their confidence level. We evolved to be slightly overconfident because overconfidence works. This is still hardwired in your brain today. When you encounter someone acting with absolute confidence, your unconscious mind interprets that confidence as evidence of competence, status, and authority. You can consciously try to resist this interpretation, but the automatic processing happens before conscious thought. By the time you're aware of the person, you've already made judgments based on their boldness or lack thereof. This is why Law 28 is so powerful and so dangerous. It hacks directly into this evolutionary programming. The person who acts with boldness triggers automatic deference and respect responses in others, even when that boldness is completely unjustified. The person who acts with hesitation triggers automatic skepticism and dismissal, even when their hesitation comes from appropriate caution and careful analysis. Fast forward to the 16th century, and we see this principle deployed with devastating effectiveness. Let me tell you about Hernán Cortés and the conquest of the Aztec Empire. Cortés arrived in Mexico with approximately 600 men. The Aztec Empire had a population of millions, a powerful military, and controlled a vast territory. By every rational measure, Cortés had no chance of success. His boldness made the impossible happen. When Cortés arrived on the coast, he did something that has become legendary. He burned his ships. His men could not retreat. They could not change their minds. They could only go forward. This wasn't just a tactical decision. It was psychological warfare against his own men and the Aztecs who heard about it. The message was clear: we are so certain of victory that we've eliminated the possibility of retreat. That level of confidence was incomprehensible to those who encountered it. Cortés marched inland with absolute boldness. When he met Aztec emissaries, he didn't negotiate or show deference. He made demands. He declared that their emperor Moctezuma must submit to the Spanish crown and the Christian God. The audacity of this demand, 600 foreigners commanding an empire of millions, it created psychological confusion. The Aztecs had frameworks for understanding cautious enemies, defensive enemies, even aggressive enemies. They had no framework for understanding enemies this suicidally bold. Moctezuma, one of the most powerful rulers in the world, responded to Cortés's boldness with hesitation. He sent gifts hoping to appease the Spaniards. He consulted priests and advisors about prophecies. He delayed and deliberated while Cortés acted. When Cortés finally reached the capital city of Tenochtitlan, he walked straight into Moctezuma's palace and took him hostage. The emperor of millions, captured by a few hundred foreigners, largely because their boldness was so extreme it paralyzed those who should have destroyed them. Now, I'm not celebrating colonialism or the atrocities that followed. What I'm showing you is the pure mechanics of how boldness operates as a force multiplier. Cortés succeeded not because he had superior forces but because his absolute boldness created confusion, hesitation, and psychological paralysis in those who opposed him. Meanwhile, his own men, terrified as they were, had no choice but to match his boldness because retreat was impossible. This reveals something crucial about Law 28. Boldness isn't just about how others perceive you. It's about how it transforms your own actions. When you commit fully, when you eliminate the possibility of retreat, when you act as if success is inevitable, you access capabilities and determination that hesitation keeps locked away. Boldness changes you as much as it changes others' perceptions of you. Let me show you how this operates in the modern world, because if you think this is just historical curiosity, you're missing how boldness shapes every power dynamic you're part of right now. Think about negotiations. Two people are negotiating a business deal. One makes a bold opening offer, far beyond what they expect to get, stated with absolute confidence. The other makes a reasonable opening offer, carefully justified, acknowledging the other side's interests. Which negotiator gets a better outcome? Almost always the bold one. The bold negotiator anchors the entire negotiation around their extreme position. Even when they compromise, they're compromising from a high baseline. The reasonable negotiator anchors around fairness and mutual benefit, which sounds ethical but practically guarantees they'll get less. The bold negotiator's confidence makes their extreme demands seem potentially legitimate. The reasonable negotiator's caution makes even their fair demands seem potentially questionable. This pattern repeats across every domain of human interaction. Job interviews. The candidate who boldly asks for a salary at the top of the range, who confidently describes their abilities in the most favorable terms, who shows no hesitation or self-doubt. That candidate gets better offers than equally qualified candidates who are more modest and careful in their self-presentation. Sales. The salesperson who boldly assumes the sale, who acts as if the customer's purchase is inevitable, who shows no doubt about the product's value. That salesperson closes more deals than the salesperson who carefully qualifies prospects and respectfully requests consideration. Dating and relationships. The person who boldly expresses interest, who confidently approaches potential partners, who shows no fear of rejection, that person has far more romantic success than people who carefully calculate their chances and cautiously signal their interest. Leadership. The leader who boldly sets ambitious goals, who confidently declares their vision, who shows no uncertainty about the path forward. That leader attracts more followers and resources than leaders who carefully hedge their predictions and modestly acknowledge all the challenges. The pattern is universal. Boldness works. Not because bold people are more competent or more deserving, but because boldness itself triggers psychological responses in others that open doors, create opportunities, and stack outcomes in the bold person's favor. Now here's where this gets really dark, and I need you to pay close attention because this is the twist that changes everything. The reason boldness works isn't because people are fooled by it. It's because people want to believe in it. We're desperately seeking people who seem certain, who appear to know what they're doing, who project confidence in an uncertain world. When we encounter boldness, we want it to be justified. We want to believe that confidence indicates competence. So we actively look for evidence that confirms the bold person's status while filtering out evidence that contradicts it. This is why incompetent people with extreme confidence often rise higher than competent people with appropriate humility. The incompetent person's confidence triggers our desire to believe in competent leadership. The competent person's humility triggers our skepticism and doubt. We promote the confident and question the cautious, even when this is backwards based on actual ability. This creates a perverse dynamic in organizations. The people who succeed aren't necessarily the most capable. They're the most bold. They're the ones who confidently take credit for team successes, who boldly propose ambitious projects regardless of feasibility, who show no self-doubt even when doubt would be appropriate. Meanwhile, people who accurately assess their abilities, who carefully acknowledge limitations, who show appropriate caution, they get passed over for advancement because their realism is interpreted as lack of confidence. Let me give you a contemporary example that perfectly illustrates Law 28 in action. Look at the rise of Elon Musk and Tesla. In 2003, electric cars were widely considered impractical, too expensive, too limited in range, too slow to charge. Every major automaker had concluded that electric vehicles were not viable for mass market adoption. Elon Musk looked at this consensus and acted with extreme boldness. He didn't just claim electric cars could work. He claimed Tesla would revolutionize the entire automotive industry, would accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy, would make gasoline cars obsolete. These claims were absurdly ambitious given that Tesla had no cars in production, no manufacturing infrastructure, no dealer network, and was competing against companies with 100-year head starts. The boldness of his vision attracted investors who wanted to be part of something revolutionary. It attracted engineers who wanted to work on the future instead of incremental improvements to combustion engines. It attracted customers who wanted to be early adopters of transformation. The boldness itself created momentum. Now, Tesla has faced endless problems. Production delays, quality issues, financial crises, controversies, failed predictions. By conventional analysis, the company should have failed multiple times. But Musk's continued boldness, his willingness to make even bigger promises when smaller ones weren't met, his absolute confidence even in the face of obvious problems, it kept investors believing, employees committed, and customers waiting. Compare this to traditional automakers who cautiously developed electric vehicles, carefully managed expectations, and conservatively projected timelines. They were more realistic, more honest, more competent in many ways. And they lost. They lost market share, they lost talent, they lost the narrative about the future of transportation. Not because they were wrong but because they weren't bold. This is the core mechanic of Law 28. In human psychology, boldness often defeats competence, confidence often defeats correctness, and the audacious often overcome the adequate. It's not fair. It's not rational. But it's real. Now let's talk about the mechanics of boldness, because this isn't just about personality or natural charisma. Boldness is a learnable skill with specific techniques that anyone can deploy. Understanding these techniques is crucial whether you're using them or defending against them. First technique, total commitment. Boldness requires eliminating visible doubt or hesitation. When you act, act completely. Don't hedge. Don't qualify. Don't leave yourself obvious escape routes. The moment people sense you're not fully committed, the psychological power of boldness evaporates. This is why Cortez burned his ships. It wasn't just motivating his men. It was eliminating any signal of doubt that would undermine his boldness. In practical terms, this means when you make a proposal, don't apologize for it or immediately offer compromises. State it clearly and confidently. When you set a deadline, don't cushion it with contingencies. Commit to the date. When you declare a goal, don't qualify it with all the ways it might not work. Own the ambition fully. The commitment itself creates credibility. Second technique, act as if. Boldness means behaving as if the reality you want already exists. Victor Lustig acted as if he had every right to sell the Eiffel Tower. That act as if quality made others perceive that right as real. This is why fake it till you make it actually works. Not because faking is good, but because confidence precedes evidence in human psychology. Act as if you belong in the room, and people assume you do. Act as if your idea is obviously valuable, and people look for its value. Act as if your success is inevitable, and people invest in that inevitability. Third technique, speed of action. Boldness requires moving quickly before doubt, yours or others, has time to accumulate. Hesitation kills boldness. The longer you deliberate, the more objections arise, the more fear accumulates, the more the bold action starts to seem crazy rather than confident. This is why successful deployment of Law 28 often involves rapid action that doesn't give people time to fully process what's happening. When you see an opportunity, move immediately. When you decide on a course of action, execute quickly. When you make a bold claim, follow it instantly with bold action that assumes the claim is true. The speed prevents both your own second-guessing and others' skeptical analysis. Fourth technique, ignore criticism. Bold people don't defend against every objection or justify every decision. They acknowledge criticism minimally and continue forward. This isn't about being arrogant or dismissive. It's about understanding that explaining and defending signals doubt. The bold person's attitude is that their direction is obviously correct, so criticism is either misguided or irrelevant. This attitude, maintained consistently, actually makes people question their own criticism rather than the bold person's direction. Fifth technique, escalation. When boldness meets resistance, the instinct is to retreat or compromise. Bold people do the opposite. They escalate. They become even more audacious. This is counterintuitive but psychologically effective. The escalation signals supreme confidence, which makes people reconsider their resistance. Maybe this bold person knows something I don't. Maybe their confidence is based on information or insight I'm missing. The escalation plants doubt in the opposition while reinforcing the bold person's frame. These techniques work because they exploit specific features of human psychology. We use confidence as a heuristic for competence. We interpret commitment as evidence of validity. We assume that people who act boldly must have reasons for that boldness. We feel pressure to match the energy and certainty of those we interact with. But here's what makes Law 28 genuinely dangerous. It works even when it shouldn't. Even when the boldness is completely unjustified. Even when the confident person is wrong. Even when the bold action leads to disaster. In the short term, boldness almost always wins. The long-term consequences come later, after the bold person has already gained what they wanted. Think about the financial crisis of 2008. It was caused largely by bold actors making incredibly risky bets with supreme confidence. Traders who boldly claimed they understood complex financial instruments they didn't comprehend. Executives who boldly leveraged their institutions 30 or 40 to 1. Ratings agencies who boldly gave AAA ratings to toxic assets. Their boldness made them rich and powerful. The fact that they were catastrophically wrong only became clear years later, after they'd already collected their bonuses and built their fortunes. This pattern repeats constantly. Bold leaders start unnecessary wars. Bold entrepreneurs destroy companies through overexpansion. Bold investors create bubbles that devastate economies. In each case, the boldness works initially. It attracts resources, followers, and opportunities. The disaster comes later, often after the bold actor has moved on to new ventures. This is the moral hazard at the heart of Law 28. It rewards boldness regardless of whether that boldness is wise. It punishes caution regardless of whether that caution is prudent. From an individual perspective, being bold is almost always the optimal strategy. From a collective perspective, universal boldness is catastrophic. So how do you defend against Law 28 when it's being used against you? How do you protect yourself from being swept up by someone else's unjustified confidence? This is crucial because you're surrounded by bold actors trying to influence you constantly. First defense, slow down their speed. Bold actors rely on rapid movement to prevent analysis. Force deliberation. Ask for time to consider. Request documentation. Insist on due diligence. The bold actor will pressure you to decide quickly, claiming urgency or limited opportunity. This pressure is itself evidence that they don't want you thinking carefully. Legitimate opportunities can withstand examination. Cons require speed to work. Second defense, demand specifics. Boldness thrives on grand visions and vague promises. Force the bold actor to get specific about timelines, metrics, mechanisms. How exactly will this work? What specifically are the steps? When precisely will results appear? Bold actors hate specifics because specifics can be checked. They want to operate at the level of vision and confidence where their boldness is most powerful. Third defense, check their track record. Bold people often have histories of bold failures they've moved on from. They're still bold because boldness keeps working for them personally even when their bold actions fail objectively. Research their previous ventures. Talk to people who worked with them before. You'll often find a pattern of bold promises, initial success based on confidence, eventual failure, and rapid movement to the next bold venture before being held accountable. Fourth defense, test their reaction to doubt. Express skepticism about some aspect of their bold claims. Watch how they respond. Do they engage substantively with your concerns? Or do they dismiss, redirect, pressure, or attack? Bold actors whose confidence is backed by substance can handle doubt. Bold actors whose confidence is just performance get aggressive when doubted because your skepticism threatens the frame they're maintaining. Fifth defense, separate confidence from competence. Train yourself to notice when you're being influenced by someone's boldness rather than their actual argument or evidence. This is difficult because the psychological effect of boldness is largely unconscious. But you can develop awareness. When you notice yourself being impressed by someone, ask explicitly, am I impressed by their confidence or by their actual capabilities? Am I attracted to their boldness or to the merit of what they're proposing? These defenses work, but they require conscious effort and they make you seem cautious, skeptical, difficult. This is why most people don't employ these defenses consistently. It's socially easier to go along with bold actors than to resist them. It's psychologically more comfortable to believe in their confidence than to maintain skepticism. This is exactly why Law 28 is so powerful and so persistent. Now let me take you to the deepest level of this law, because there's a layer that transforms how you see not just boldness but reality itself. Law 28 reveals that confidence and reality have a circular relationship. Reality doesn't just determine appropriate confidence levels. Confidence actually shapes reality. When you act with boldness, you change how people respond to you. Those changed responses create new opportunities. Those opportunities lead to outcomes that justify the original boldness. The confidence becomes self-fulfilling not through magic but through the very real effects it has on human behavior and social dynamics. Think about public speaking. Someone who speaks with hesitation, with vocal fry, with qualifiers and apologies, their content doesn't matter. The audience tunes out. The message gets dismissed. The speaker's lack of confidence undermines whatever truth they're trying to communicate. Someone who speaks the exact same content with boldness, with vocal authority, with confidence and conviction, the audience leans in. The message resonates. The speaker's confidence amplifies their message's impact. Same content. Different boldness. Completely different outcomes. The bold speaker isn't lying or deceiving. They're creating a reality where their message matters more because their delivery makes it matter more. The confidence shapes the reality of the message's impact. Or think about startups. A founder who pitches their idea with hesitation, acknowledging all the risks and challenges, realistic about the odds, they struggle to raise money. Investors perceive weakness and uncertainty. A founder who pitches the exact same idea with extreme boldness, declaring inevitable success, dismissing risks as manageable, projecting supreme confidence, they raise millions. Same idea. Different boldness. Different reality. And here's the twist, the bold founder is more likely to succeed not because their boldness magically makes the business work but because their boldness attracted more capital, better talent, more partnerships, more media attention. The confidence created real advantages that improved the actual odds of success. The boldness manufactured its own justification. This is the ultimate mechanic of Law 28. It's not that boldness tricks people. It's that boldness changes the game itself. It alters the social dynamics, the resource flows, the opportunities available. It creates a feedback loop where confidence generates results that justify the confidence, which generates more confidence, which generates more results. But this feedback loop has a dark side. It means that boldness can succeed far beyond what underlying merit would predict. The most confident people aren't necessarily the most capable. They're just the most confident. And in a world where confidence shapes opportunity, the confident accumulate advantages that compound over time completely independent of their actual competence. This creates massive inefficiency in how we allocate resources, opportunities, and power. We're not selecting for ability. We're selecting for boldness. The people who rise to the top are often not the people who are best at the job. They're the people who are boldest in pursuing the job. Once there, their position gives them resources and visibility that create real accomplishments, justifying their position retroactively. But someone more capable but less bold never got the chance to show what they could do. You see this everywhere. Academia, where bold self-promotion matters more than careful research. Media, where confident personalities get platforms regardless of expertise. Politics, where bold promises win elections over realistic policy proposals. Business, where bold risk-takers get funded while cautious builders get ignored. The system is optimized for boldness, not quality. This creates a philosophical problem. If boldness shapes reality, if confidence creates its own justification, if being bold makes you more successful which makes your boldness justified, then what does merit even mean? Are we measuring people's capabilities or just their confidence? And if we can't separate the two, if confidence is capability in terms of actual outcomes, then maybe boldness is merit. I don't have a comfortable answer to that. What I can tell you is that understanding this dynamic is essential for navigating any competitive arena. You're competing not just against people's abilities but against their boldness. And boldness, unfortunately, is often more decisive than ability. So what do you do with this knowledge? You have 3 options, each with different trade-offs. Option 1, become bold. Learn to project confidence even when you feel doubt. Act as if success is inevitable even when it's uncertain. Move quickly and decisively even when you're not sure. Commit totally even when you want to hedge. Become the person who makes others believe through the sheer force of your conviction. This works. It will open doors. It will create opportunities. It will generate success that wouldn't have been possible with a more cautious approach. The cost is that you'll sometimes fail spectacularly. You'll sometimes lead others astray with your confidence. You'll sometimes succeed despite being wrong rather than because you're right. Option 2, maintain realism. Acknowledge uncertainty. Express appropriate doubt. Make careful decisions based on analysis rather than confidence. Refuse to project false certainty. This is more ethical in many ways. It's more honest. It's more respectful of complexity and uncertainty. The cost is that you'll be consistently outcompete by bolder actors. You'll watch less capable but more confident people rise above you. You'll see resources and opportunities flow to those who project certainty even when that certainty is unjustified. You'll be right more often but rewarded less. Option 3, strategic boldness. Be bold selectively. Most of the time, operate with careful realism. But at crucial moments, when stakes are high and boldness could create breakthrough opportunities, drop the caution and commit fully. This is the sophisticated approach but also the hardest to execute. It requires excellent judgment about when boldness serves you and when it would lead to disaster. It requires the ability to switch between modes without seeming inconsistent or unstable. Most successful people operate somewhere between options 1 and 3. They're generally bolder than pure realism would justify but not recklessly bold. They've calibrated their confidence level to be slightly above their proven competence, enough to create opportunity without creating disaster. They understand that in most situations, projecting confidence produces better outcomes than expressing doubt, even when the doubt is more accurate. But here's what hardly anyone talks about: the psychological cost of sustained boldness. When you constantly project confidence you don't feel, when you regularly act as if you're certain when you're actually terrified, when you maintain a performance of conviction that doesn't match your internal experience, it's exhausting. It creates a split between your public persona and your private self. Over time, this split can become unbearable. Many highly successful people who've mastered Law 28 describe feeling like imposters. Not because they're incompetent, but because their external boldness so dramatically exceeds their internal certainty. They're projecting confidence they don't feel, getting rewards for that projection, then feeling like frauds because they know the confidence is at least partly performance. This is the hidden tax of boldness. It works, but it costs. The cost is authenticity, inner peace, the ability to acknowledge doubt and uncertainty. You become trapped in a performance of confidence because admitting doubt would undermine everything you've built on the foundation of that projected confidence. Some people handle this split easily. They're comfortable with performance, with maintaining a gap between inner and outer experience. For others, it's corrosive. They succeed externally while struggling internally with the knowledge that their success is built partly on confidence that exceeds their certainty. There's no easy resolution to this tension. What I can tell you is that awareness helps. Understanding that everyone successful is projecting confidence beyond their certainty. Recognizing that boldness is a tool, not a fundamental truth about yourself. Maintaining some space in your life where you can drop the performance and acknowledge doubt. These practices don't eliminate the tension but make it more bearable. Let me tell you one final story that brings everything together. In 1934, a 21-year-old named Frank Abagnale Jr. was broke and desperate in New York City. He had no job prospects, no education beyond high school, no skills or credentials. What he had was audacity. He walked into a bank wearing a security guard uniform he'd bought at a costume shop. He placed a sign on the night deposit box that said it was temporarily out of order and directed customers to deposit their money with him, the guard. For hours, he stood there in his fake uniform collecting thousands of dollars in deposits. Then he simply walked away. This success emboldened him. He forged a pilot's license and spent 2 years flying over 1,000,000 miles on Pan Am as a deadheading pilot, staying in hotels and eating meals all charged to the airline. He posed as a doctor and actually supervised interns at a hospital. He practiced law in Louisiana despite never attending law school. He taught sociology at a university despite never completing college. His boldness was so extreme, so unshakable, that people assumed it must be legitimate. A 23-year-old supervising medical interns? He acted like he belonged there, so everyone assumed he had credentials. A pilot who looked barely old enough to drive. He walked with such confidence through airports that no one questioned him. He was eventually caught, but only after years of successfully inhabiting roles he had no right to, purely through the power of absolute boldness. Frank Abagnale's story is extreme, but the principle applies universally. The person who acts like they belong usually gets treated like they belong. The person who moves with confidence through spaces they don't have credentials for often gains access those spaces denied to more qualified but less bold people. The audacious create reality through the force of their audacity. This is simultaneously inspiring and terrifying. Inspiring because it means you're not as limited by your credentials, background, or current position as you think. If you can master boldness, you can access opportunities that seem beyond your reach. Terrifying because it means the world is full of confident incompetents who've succeeded through audacity while more capable but less bold people remain stuck. So as we close this exploration of Law 28, I want you to sit with these final questions. Where in your life are you being too cautious? Where is appropriate humility about your limitations actually holding you back from opportunities you could handle? Where would boldness serve you? And equally important, where are you being influenced by someone else's boldness? Who in your life is succeeding more through confidence than competence? Where are you following bold leaders without adequately questioning whether their boldness is backed by substance? The balance between these questions defines how you navigate power. Too cautious, and you'll be perpetually outcompete by bolder actors. Too bold, and you'll eventually face disasters your confidence can't overcome. The art is knowing when each approach serves you. What I know for certain is this: the world rewards boldness far more than it rewards caution. Fair or not, wise or not, that's the reality. The person who hesitates, who carefully weighs every risk, who expresses appropriate doubt, that person usually loses to the person who charges forward with absolute confidence even when that confidence exceeds their competence. Law 28 doesn't tell you this is right. It just tells you this is real. What you do with that reality, whether you embrace boldness or maintain caution, whether you exploit this principle or resist it, that's your choice. But make it consciously. Make it with full understanding of the costs and benefits. Enter action with boldness. Or watch while bolder actors seize the opportunities you carefully considered and ultimately let pass. There's no neutral option. In competitive arenas, caution is a choice to lose to those more willing to project confidence they might not fully feel. The game is already happening. The bold are already playing. The only question is whether you'll learn the rules before they use those rules against you. Boldness wins. Not always. Not forever. But far more often than it should based on merit alone. That's Law 28. That's how power actually works. What you do with that knowledge will shape every ambition you pursue and every competition you enter. Be bold. Or be left behind. The choice, as always, is yours. But let me take you even deeper into the mechanics of boldness, because there are layers to this law that most people never discover. Understanding these advanced principles will transform not just how you act but how you think about action itself. Consider the relationship between boldness and timing. Most people think boldness is about acting quickly, and that's partly true. But the deepest practitioners of Law 28 understand something more nuanced. Boldness is about acting decisively at the moment of maximum leverage. It's not just about speed. It's about recognizing when the conditions are right for bold action to have disproportionate impact. Let me give you a historical example that illustrates this perfectly. In 1851, Louis Napoleon Bonaparte was the elected president of France, but the Constitution prevented him from seeking a second term. He had a choice: accept this limitation or seize absolute power. For months, he carefully assessed the political landscape. The assembly was divided. The military was uncertain. The public was tired of political instability. He waited, gathering intelligence, positioning allies, preparing infrastructure. Then, on December 2, 1851, he struck with overwhelming boldness. In a single night, he arrested 60 opposition leaders, dissolved the assembly, deployed troops throughout Paris, and declared himself dictator. The speed and totality of his action paralyzed resistance. By the time his opponents understood what was happening, he controlled all instruments of power. Within a year, he had transformed France from a republic into an empire with himself as Napoleon III. The brilliance wasn't just the boldness of the coup. It was the patience that preceded it. He waited until the exact moment when bold action would face minimum resistance and maximum success. This is advanced application of Law 28. Bold action at the right moment multiplies its effectiveness exponentially compared to bold action at the wrong moment. In your life, this means learning to distinguish between moments when boldness will be rewarded and moments when it will be punished. Not every situation rewards audacity. Sometimes the conditions aren't right. Sometimes the opposition is too strong. Sometimes the resources aren't in place. The amateur is bold all the time. The master is bold precisely when boldness has the highest probability of success. How do you recognize these moments? There are specific signals to watch for. First, ambiguity. When situations are unclear and multiple interpretations are possible, boldness can define reality. In clear situations with established rules and expectations, boldness often backfires because it conflicts with obvious reality. But in ambiguous situations, the bold actor can make their interpretation the accepted reality simply by acting as if it already is. Second, transition periods. When systems are changing, when leadership is uncertain, when structures are in flux, these are optimal moments for bold action. The old rules are breaking down but new rules haven't solidified. Bold actors during transitions can shape the new order. This is why revolutions, corporate reorganizations, and cultural shifts create opportunities for audacious individuals to rise rapidly. The system is fluid enough that boldness can redirect it. Third, attention gaps. When everyone is focused elsewhere, when the powerful are distracted, when scrutiny is low, bold action can accomplish things that would be impossible under normal observation. This is why some of the most audacious moves in business and politics happen during holidays, weekends, or when major news events dominate attention. The bold actor strikes when others aren't watching closely enough to mobilize effective resistance. Fourth, resource asymmetry. When you have access to resources, information, or capabilities that others don't know you possess, boldness leverages that hidden advantage. The bold action seems crazy to observers who don't know what you know. But it's actually calculated based on advantages they can't see. This is how smaller players can defeat larger opponents through audacious moves that seem suicidal until they succeed. Understanding these conditions transforms boldness from reckless courage into strategic precision. You're not being bold for its own sake. You're deploying boldness as a weapon at moments when it has maximum effectiveness. This is the difference between brave fools who fail boldly and strategic operators who use boldness to achieve what caution never could. Now let me show you how boldness operates in complex social systems, because this is where Law 28 becomes truly sophisticated. In any organization, there's a network of relationships, expectations, and norms. Bold action disrupts this network. The disruption can either destroy you or elevate you, depending on how you manage it. Think about a corporate environment. There are established procedures, chains of command, cultural expectations about how things are done. Someone who boldly violates these norms will trigger resistance. The system will try to expel the disruptor to restore equilibrium. This is why many bold people flame out in corporate settings. Their boldness triggers immune responses that neutralize them. But sophisticated operators understand how to be bold in ways that align with the organization's values even while disrupting its practices. They frame their bold action as serving the organization's stated mission. They position themselves as more committed to the company's ideals than those who resist them. They make their boldness about organizational benefit rather than personal ambition. For example, imagine an engineer who boldly proposes scrapping months of work on a project and starting over with a completely different approach. If they frame this as personal preference or criticism of their colleagues, they'll face massive resistance. But if they frame it as unwavering commitment to the company's standards of excellence, as refusing to ship mediocre work even at personal cost, as protecting the company's reputation, suddenly their boldness becomes heroic rather than disruptive. Same bold action. Different framing. Completely different organizational response. The sophisticated operator makes their boldness serve the system's stated values even while disrupting the system's actual practices. This is advanced social maneuvering that most people never learn. This principle applies everywhere. In politics, bold reforms are palatable when framed as returning to foundational principles rather than revolutionary change. In relationships, bold statements about what you need are acceptable when framed as serving the relationship rather than selfish demands. In negotiations, bold positions are less offensive when positioned as fair outcomes rather than power plays. The boldness remains identical, but the framing determines whether it's rejected or embraced. Let me take you into the psychology of what happens inside the bold person, because this internal dimension is rarely discussed but absolutely critical. When you act with boldness that exceeds your actual certainty, you're essentially lying. Not to others but to yourself. You're pretending to have confidence you don't feel, certainty you don't possess, conviction that doesn't match your internal experience. This creates cognitive dissonance. Your actions don't match your feelings. Most people resolve this dissonance by bringing their actions back in line with their feelings. They become cautious again. They let their doubt show. They retreat to authenticity. This is why most people can't sustain boldness. The internal tension becomes unbearable. But successful practitioners of Law 28 resolve the dissonance differently. They change their feelings to match their actions. By consistently acting bold, they actually become more confident. The performance of certainty gradually transforms into real certainty. The fake it till you make it principle works not because you're fooling others but because you're reprogramming yourself. This is supported by psychological research on embodied cognition. When you consistently behave in certain ways, your brain starts generating the emotions and beliefs that match those behaviors. If you act confident repeatedly, you develop actual confidence. If you perform courage consistently, you become genuinely courageous. The external performance creates internal reality. This means that boldness is partly a choice about which feedback loop you want to enter. The cautious person acts carefully, receives feedback that caution is wise, becomes more cautious, acts more carefully, receives more feedback confirming caution. They're trapped in a self-reinforcing cycle of increasing timidity. The bold person acts confidently, receives feedback that boldness works, becomes more confident, acts more boldly, receives more feedback confirming boldness. They're trapped in a self-reinforcing cycle of increasing audacity. Neither cycle is more true than the other. They're both self-fulfilling. The question is which cycle serves your goals better. For most competitive pursuits, the boldness cycle produces better outcomes even though it's psychologically harder to initiate. Starting the boldness cycle requires what I call the courage of inauthenticity. You must be willing to act in ways that don't match how you feel. You must be comfortable with performance, with maintaining a gap between inner and outer experience, at least temporarily. Most people can't do this because they've been trained that authenticity is sacred, that you must always express your true feelings, that any performance is dishonest. But this is naive. All social interaction involves performance. The question isn't whether to perform but which performance to choose. You can perform your doubts and insecurities, or you can perform confidence and certainty. Both are choices about which aspects of your internal experience to express externally. Neither is more authentic than the other. They're just different strategic choices about how to present yourself. The sophisticated understanding is that authenticity itself is a performance. There's no pure, unfiltered expression of your true self because your true self is complex, contradictory, and constantly changing. What you present as authentic is already a curated selection of which thoughts and feelings to express. Given that curation is inevitable, you might as well cure it strategically rather than naively. This leads to a deeper question: if you consistently perform boldness until it becomes real confidence, were you being inauthentic or were you becoming your authentic self? If the performance transforms you into someone genuinely confident, was it fake or was it the process of actualizing latent potential? These questions don't have clear answers, which suggests our categories of authentic versus fake are too simplistic for how identity actually works. Now let me show you how boldness operates in networks and reputation systems, because this is where individual boldness can scale into lasting power. When you act boldly and succeed, you don't just gain the immediate benefit of that success. You gain a reputation for boldness and effectiveness. This reputation becomes a force multiplier for all future bold actions. Think about venture capital. When an unknown entrepreneur makes a bold bet and succeeds, they're celebrated for that specific success. But when a well-known entrepreneur with a track record of bold successes makes another bold bet, they get resources and support before proving anything. Their reputation for successful boldness makes future boldness easier because people invest in the pattern rather than the specific venture. This creates a rich-get-richer dynamic. The person who succeeds boldly once finds it easier to be bold again because their reputation precedes them. Success compounds into more opportunities for success. Meanwhile, the person who was cautious and successful finds that caution doesn't build reputation the same way. Careful success is attributed to luck or favorable conditions. Bold success is attributed to the person's exceptional qualities. This is deeply unfair but absolutely real. Two people with identical outcomes get very different reputational benefits if one achieved their outcome through bold action and the other through careful planning. The bold actor is seen as special. The careful planner is seen as competent but not exceptional. And in competitive environments, exceptional perception creates more opportunity than competent reality. The strategic implication is that early in your career or any new domain, you should be looking for opportunities to succeed boldly rather than just opportunities to succeed. A modest success achieved through audacious action builds more reputation than a large success achieved through conventional methods. You're not just playing for immediate outcomes. You're playing for the reputation that will make future outcomes easier to achieve. This is why some people deliberately take on high-risk, high-visibility projects early in their careers. They're not crazy. They're reputation building. A failure in a bold attempt is often less career-damaging than mediocre success in a safe role. The bold failure shows ambition and courage. The safe mediocrity shows neither. And if the bold attempt succeeds, it can launch a career in ways that years of careful competence never could. Let me show you how this plays out in specific domains. In academia, the researcher who makes bold theoretical claims and backs them with dramatic experiments builds reputation faster than researchers who carefully test incremental hypotheses. Even if the bold researcher is wrong more often, when they're right, they're celebrated as visionary. The careful researcher accumulates solid but unmemorable contributions that don't build the same kind of reputation capital. In entrepreneurship, the founder who attempts something audacious and fails often has an easier time raising money for their next venture than founders who built sustainable but unexciting businesses. Investors want to back bold vision, not careful execution. The person who aimed for transformation and fell short is more attractive than the person who aimed for modest success and achieved it. In creative fields, artists who make bold stylistic choices and polarize audiences build followings faster than artists who competently execute conventional work. The bold artist creates strong reactions, positive and negative. Strong reactions create visibility and identity. The competent conventional artist pleases some people mildly but generates no passionate response, which means no real following. The pattern is universal. Bold action, even when it fails, builds reputation in ways that cautious success doesn't. This seems backwards but makes sense when you understand what reputation actually is. Reputation isn't primarily about your results. It's about the story people tell about you. Bold action creates better stories than careful action. Better stories create stronger reputations. Stronger reputations create more opportunities. Now let's examine the relationship between boldness and timing in negotiations, because this is where Law 28 can be practiced and refined in everyday interactions. Every negotiation has moments where bold moves are possible and moments where they would backfire. Learning to recognize the difference is a learnable skill. Early in negotiations, boldness establishes frame and anchors expectations. The person who makes the first bold offer sets the entire range of discussion. Even when their offer is extreme, it creates a reference point that all subsequent negotiation orbits around. Studies show that final negotiated outcomes are consistently closer to the first offer than to the midpoint between first offers, which means going bold first creates massive advantage. But there are specific techniques for making that first bold offer effective rather than offensive. You must present it with confidence but without aggression. You must act as if it's reasonable while knowing it's extreme. You must be willing to justify it briefly but not defensively. You must maintain that the offer reflects value, not power play. Get this balance right and your bold opening moves the entire negotiation in your direction. Mid-negotiation, boldness takes a different form. Here it's about refusing to split differences, about holding firm on key points, about being willing to walk away if your core needs aren't met. Most people become increasingly flexible as negotiations progress. They want to close the deal. They want agreement. This desire makes them concede progressively. The bold negotiator resists this pressure. They know that maintaining firmness creates more respect and better outcomes than showing flexibility. Late in negotiations, boldness is about closing. Most people become tentative at the end. They worry about last-minute deal collapse. They become increasingly accommodating. The bold negotiator does the opposite. They push for final concessions. They act as if the other side's agreement is certain. They move toward conclusion with confidence that creates momentum. This final boldness often extracts concessions that seemed impossible earlier because the other side has invested so much time they're reluctant to let the deal collapse over final points. Understanding these phases transforms negotiation from anxiety-inducing confrontation to systematic application of principles. You're not reacting emotionally. You're deploying boldness strategically at moments when it has maximum effect. This makes negotiation less stressful because you have a framework instead of just improvising based on fear and desire. Let me show you how boldness operates in crisis situations, because this is where Law 28 reveals its deepest power. When systems are failing, when panic is spreading, when everyone is paralyzed by fear and uncertainty, the person who acts with decisive boldness can seize control and reshape entire situations. Think about financial crises. When markets are crashing, most investors freeze or panic sell. A few bold investors buy aggressively, acting as if they see opportunity where others see disaster. Sometimes they're right and make fortunes. Sometimes they're wrong and lose everything. But here's what's interesting, even when they're wrong, they often don't lose as much as you'd expect because their boldness in buying actually helps stabilize markets, creating some of the recovery they were betting on. This is boldness as self-fulfilling prophecy at maximum intensity. The bold action doesn't just predict outcomes, it creates outcomes. The investor who boldly buys during a crash signals confidence that attracts other buyers, which creates the recovery that justifies the original boldness. Reality doesn't exist independent of bold action. Bold action shapes reality. Or consider organizational crises. When companies face existential threats, most executives become cautious. They form committees, study options, try to build consensus. A bold leader makes decisions immediately. They announce a clear direction and begin executing before analysis is complete. This decisiveness itself becomes stabilizing. Employees, customers, investors, they're terrified by uncertainty. Decisive action, even if it's not optimal, provides certainty that reduces panic. The bold leader might be making the wrong decision. But a wrong decision executed with confidence often produces better outcomes than the right decision made tentatively or slowly. Because in crises, momentum and morale matter as much as strategy. Boldness creates momentum and morale. Caution, no matter how wise, creates neither. This reveals something profound about leadership. The leader's job isn't primarily to make correct decisions. It's to make decisions confidently enough that others will follow and execute effectively. A mediocre strategy executed with conviction and full commitment often beats a brilliant strategy executed with doubt and half-hearted effort. The leader who understands this focuses on decisive boldness as much as strategic correctness. Now let me take you into the darkest application of Law 28, because understanding the extremes helps you recognize more subtle versions. There are people who use boldness not just to advance themselves but to actively dominate and exploit others. Understanding their techniques helps you defend against them. The dominating personality uses boldness to overwhelm other people's boundaries and objections. They make outrageous requests with such confidence that people feel uncomfortable refusing. They violate social norms with such brazenness that others don't know how to respond. They commit small violations that test whether you'll object, and when you don't, they escalate to larger violations. Each time you fail to push back, they become bolder. This is a systematic assault on your sense of what's acceptable. They're rewriting the rules of interaction through pure audacity. The defense is to recognize the pattern early and push back hard on the first violation, not the 10th. Once you've accepted several violations, pushing back later seems disproportionate and difficult. But pushing back on the first violation is straightforward. That's not acceptable, that's not how this works, that's not something I'll agree to. The bold dominator relies on your social conditioning not to make scenes, not to be difficult, not to reject people. They weaponize your politeness against you. The counter is to be willing to be socially uncomfortable, to directly name what they're doing, to refuse to play along with the frame they're establishing. This is psychologically hard but absolutely necessary if you're dealing with someone systematically using boldness to dominate. Another dark application is the bold liar. Some people make completely false claims with such absolute confidence that others believe them or at least hesitate to challenge them. They're not just lying, they're lying boldly. The boldness makes the lie more believable because we unconsciously assume that someone lying would show signs of discomfort or hesitation. The bold liar counts on this assumption. They maintain perfect confidence while stating complete fabrications. They meet your eyes steadily. They provide specific details. They show no uncertainty. All the signals your brain uses to detect lies are absent because they're skilled performers. The only defense is to verify independently rather than relying on your intuitions about their honesty. If someone makes bold claims, demand evidence. Don't trust confidence as proof of truth. These dark applications exist and you need to recognize them. But I want to be clear, Law 28 itself isn't evil. It's neutral. Boldness can be used to dominate and exploit, yes. But it can also be used to innovate, to lead, to create, to inspire. The principle is amoral. The ethics depend entirely on what you do with it. Let me show you how boldness operates in personal relationships, because this is where most people are least bold and where boldness could serve them most. We're taught that relationships require caution, sensitivity, careful communication. This is partly true but often taken too far. Excessive caution in relationships creates problems that boldness could prevent. Think about expressing needs. Most people hint, suggest, or carefully frame their needs to avoid seeming demanding. This caution means their needs often aren't met because the other person doesn't realize how important they are. A bolder approach states needs directly and without apology. I need this from this relationship. This is what I require to be happy. This is non-negotiable for me. This boldness feels scary but creates clarity that cautious communication never achieves. Or consider addressing problems. Most people wait, hoping issues will resolve themselves. They mention problems tentatively, minimizing their significance. They accept explanations and promises without requiring change. This caution lets problems fester until they destroy the relationship. Bold people address problems immediately and directly. This is a problem. This needs to change. I need to see different behavior, not just hear promises. This boldness creates discomfort but forces resolution instead of accumulation. The paradox is that relationships built on cautious communication are actually more fragile than relationships built on bold honesty. The cautious relationship accumulates unspoken resentments and unmet needs until something breaks. The bold relationship addresses issues early when they're still manageable. Short-term discomfort from bold communication prevents long-term disaster from accumulated problems. This applies to starting relationships too. Most people are cautious in expressing romantic interest. They hint, they wait for signals, they try to minimize rejection risk. This caution means they miss opportunities and waste time in ambiguous situations. Bold people express interest directly. I find you attractive and would like to pursue this. I'm interested in a relationship with you. Are you interested? This boldness risks rejection but creates clarity immediately. You either get a yes or you get a no and can move on. Either outcome is better than weeks of ambiguous maybe. The pattern is universal. In relationships, as in all domains, cautious communication feels safe but produces worse outcomes than bold communication. The safety is illusory because unresolved issues and missed opportunities create their own dangers. Real safety comes from bold honesty that ensures everyone knows where they stand. Now let me address the most common objection to Law 28. What about the disasters that boldness creates? What about the bold leaders who started wars, the bold entrepreneurs who bankrupted companies, the bold traders who crashed economies? Doesn't boldness lead to catastrophe as often as success? This objection is valid but misunderstands the law. Law 28 doesn't claim boldness always produces good outcomes. It claims boldness produces better outcomes than timidity for the person being bold, regardless of whether those outcomes are good for others. This is a crucial distinction. Bold leaders who start unnecessary wars often personally benefit even when their nations suffer. They consolidate power, cement their legacy, achieve their political goals. The disaster falls on soldiers and citizens, not the bold leader. Bold entrepreneurs who bankrupt companies often walk away with fortunes from earlier fundraising rounds. The disaster falls on employees and investors, not the bold founder. Bold traders who crash economies usually collect their bonuses before the crash. The disaster falls on the public, not the bold trader. This is the dark side of Law 28. It creates incentives for individually rational but collectively catastrophic boldness. The person being bold captures the upside while externalizing the downside to others. From their individual perspective, boldness is the optimal strategy. From a collective perspective, it's destructive. There's no easy solution to this misalignment. Attempting to constrain boldness through rules and penalties often just makes bold actors more sophisticated about hiding their actions. The bold person learns to appear cautious while acting boldly behind the scenes. They learn to structure situations so others bear the visible risk while they remain protected. The rules meant to prevent. What individuals can do is understand the game being played. When someone is acting boldly, ask who bears the risk if they're wrong. If they're risking only their own resources and reputation, their boldness might be justified. If they're risking other people's money, lives, or futures while personally protected from downside, their boldness is predatory. This distinction helps you decide whether to follow bold leaders or resist them. Let me take you to the final layer of Law 28, the meta-level that changes everything. Once you understand this law, once you recognize how boldness operates, you face a choice that defines your relationship with power itself. You can use this knowledge to become more bold and reap the benefits. Or you can use it to become more resistant to others' boldness and protect yourself from their manipulation. But here's the trap, you can't really do both. If you become highly bold yourself, you lose the skepticism and caution that protects you from others' boldness. If you become highly skeptical and resistant, you lose the ability to act with the boldness that creates opportunity. You must choose which side of this law you want to operate from. Most people try to have it both ways. They want to be bold when it serves them and cautious when protecting themselves. This doesn't work because the psychological states are incompatible. The mind that can generate genuine boldness is a mind that's trained itself to override caution and skepticism. The mind that maintains protective skepticism is a mind that's trained itself to resist overriding caution. You cultivate one or the other, but rarely both simultaneously. The people who seem to do both are actually switching between modes, but they're not really integrating them. They're bold in their domain of expertise where they feel genuine confidence, and skeptical in domains where they feel vulnerable. This works as a hybrid approach, but note that it's domain-specific, not a true integration of boldness and skepticism. Destructive boldness often just select for more sophisticated predators. The strategic choice is to decide which mode serves your goals in which domains of your life, and then commit to developing that mode fully in that domain. Don't try to be boldly cautious or cautiously bold. Be bold where boldness serves you. Be skeptical where skepticism protects you. But be clear about which is which. So as we close this deep exploration of Law 28, I want to leave you with these final questions. Where in your life would boldness serve you better than the caution you're currently practicing? What opportunities are you missing because you're waiting for certainty that will never come? Where are you being held back not by lack of ability but by lack of willingness to act as if you already have what you're trying to achieve? And equally, where in your life are you being influenced by someone else's boldness in ways that don't serve you? Who is making you feel like their confidence indicates their competence when it might just indicate their personality? Where are you following bold leaders without adequately questioning whether their boldness is backed by substance or is just performance? The answers to these questions define your trajectory. Most people are too cautious where boldness would serve them and too trusting of others' boldness where skepticism would protect them. They have it backwards. They're cautious in advancing their own interests and credulous in accepting others' bold claims. This is the opposite of strategic. The sophisticated operator is bold in pursuing their own goals and skeptical of others' bold assertions. They act with confidence that exceeds their certainty when that confidence creates opportunity. They demand evidence that exceeds others' confidence when those others want their resources or compliance. They've internalized that boldness is a tool, not a truth, and they wield it strategically rather than being wielded by it. This is the final wisdom of Law 28. Boldness wins. But only for those bold enough to use it consciously rather than be used by it unconsciously. The world is full of bold actors manipulating cautious people. Don't be the cautious person. But don't be the recklessly bold person either. Be the strategically bold person who understands exactly what they're doing, why they're doing it, and what the real risks and rewards are. Enter action with boldness. But enter that boldness with clarity. Know what you're doing. Know why it works. Know when it serves you and when it would destroy you. Master the law. Don't let the law master you. That's the difference between bold success and bold disaster. That's the difference between using power and being used by it. That's everything.